I do carry a lot of worry. Like I'm worried about this, or I'm worried about that. And that's like, it's like a sin, to
Mhm.
worry so much. Like you shouldn't worry about what you're going to wear, what you're going to eat, or what, the birds don't worry about, that verse.
Mhm.
Um, so I think, is stopping in that moment literally and just asking God to like take that worry away,
Mhm.
and trusting that it will work out, or if it doesn't work out, it's still going to be okay. Like,
Welcome back to the Answer the Call podcast with the called career. So today it's Audrey, and I have another special guest on the podcast today because, as you know, we're working through our Enneagram series right now. We are all the way up to episode 6. So on each episode, we are bringing on a special guest from somebody in either my life or Kelsey's life who identifies with that Enneagram number and can speak specifically to how that their personality type has affected their career path and anything else that comes up in the conversation. So I am joined by Bryn today, who we met through my church, our church, and I'm so excited to talk to her about her career. I'm excited for all of you to hear it as well. So Bryn, can you just say hi and quickly tell us your job that you have right now? We'll get more into the path a little bit later on.
sure. Yeah. So it's great to be here. I currently am a marketing director for a benefits company. In short, we help nonprofits recruit, retain, and reward key employees through retirement plans.
Mm. I First of all, your job is so cool and your path has been so cool too. And then also I think the nonprofit element is going to speak to a lot of people, especially Christians. Like I talk to so many people who want to be more involved in the nonprofit space but aren't always entirely sure what that looks like. So I'm excited to hear what that's looked like getting into this career and this
Mm-hmm.
job for you. But I'm going to start us off by reading the Enneagram Type 6. And so I'll read the description from my book that I've been reading from for this entire series. And then also I'll read the basic desire and the basic fear. And then we'll get into it. So the Type 6 is titled the Loyalist, and they are described as the committed, security-oriented type. Sixes are reliable, hardworking, and responsible, but they can also be defensive, evasive, and highly anxious, running on stress while complaining about it. They are often cautious and indecisive, but can also be reactive, defiant, and rebellious. They typically have problems with self-doubt and suspicion. At their best, healthy sixes are internally stable, self-confident, and self-reliant, courageously supporting the weak and powerless. And then the basic fear is the fear of being without support or guidance, with a basic desire to be secure, which can deteriorate into attachment to beliefs, which I'm not entirely sure what that means. I'm excited to talk
Okay.
about that more.
Yeah.
But tell me, what resonated? What didn't resonate? Did anything feel like an attack?
No, so what really resonates for the negative side, you could say, is the suspicion. Like I feel like
Mm.
very suspicious. I will say that I'm a 6 wing 5. So I go
Mhm.
into like suspicion and then like investigation, like figuring out like, well, why isn't this working? Why isn't, that type of thing. And then also there's a piece in there about worry, I think, basically it doesn't say worry, but there's a lot of like problems, like worst case scenario. That's a big 6 thing, is like, what is the worst case scenario, which has helped me in my career and also hurt me in my career, because you anticipate all these negative things happening and a lot of times like thoughts become things. So if you think something negative is going to happen, like that negative thing
Mm.
might happen. But also in my job, I've done a lot with events and planning and shipping things and logistics, and things can go wrong. So you need to kind of have a backup plan. So it's kind of helped me in that way, because I'm like, okay, what if this goes wrong, and then we need to have contingency plan for it if something doesn't arrive on time, or so I think parts of my Enneagram have hurt and helped, like even the negative parts. So that really resonates. I'm trying to think some of the other things. Oh, the support thing. I know one of the 6 Enneagram things oftentimes is for someone to need input from others. So you ask a lot of other people, like, is this right? Or what do you think? Or what should I do? And so I would say, I mean, I've been working since my first job was in 2006. So I've been working, almost 20 years. And I think in the last 5 years is when I learned about Enneagram. So I often think
Mhm.
like how helpful it would have been, coming right out of college, to know what my Enneagram was, so that I know like what my motivations are for seeking jobs. Because I think also another thing that resonates is the safety and security. So that's something, and I also think that's something my mom had always put into me, like about like finding a job, like you need to find a job because you need to get insurance. Because when I was searching for a job, you needed to have, or sorry, no, when you were no longer a student is when your health insurance
Oh,
stopped. So we didn't get that like until you're 25 or
26.
26. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was really dependent on like, you need to find a job because you need benefits. So I think that's one thing that I think is really fortunate for new graduates now, is like you can kind of pick a job, or, based more on like what your true interests are. You don't feel that extra pressure to like take a job that only has benefits, because a lot of times there are jobs that don't have benefits, or you can explore more career types and freelancing things that might align with your interests more and feel that freedom to do it. I felt like I didn't have that freedom because as a marketing major, I mean, a lot of times that's something that's not like a corporate, there's more freelance opportunities, or there's just things like that. So I think not having that freedom, like seeking that security of like, I need to have a job, I need to take a job. And so um, I remember my first job. So I did move to New York City after college, and I moved to New York without a job, which is like
Oh,
totally
wow.
against, not knowing that I was an Enneagram 6, and I like sought that security. But I also already had like a contingency plan. Like if I didn't get a job, then, this other girl could move in, because I was moving up there with two friends who had jobs. So we were all looking for an apartment together, and they were saying, like, um, can we count on you for your third of the rent when we're getting this apartment? And I'm like, I really want to do it. So yeah, you can. So I had saved up enough money for like 1 or 2 months rent at the time.
Wow.
And then I figured there was another girl that was maybe going to move in. I was like, okay, if I don't get a job, maybe she can take my place, whatever. So, um, all that to say, I ended up taking a job too quickly that was not a good
Mm.
fit because of all of that. Um, and then I kind of got stuck in that job for almost 2 years because, you take a job, and then at that time, job hopping, wasn't really a thing like it is now when people work in jobs. I think now it's more common to work at a job for like 2 or 3 years and it'd be okay. But I had only been there like 6 months and I was already ready to leave. And why did you want to leave? And I don't know, as a 23-year-old, I just didn't have all that experience and stuff. So I think that's another way it kind of my yearning for security and safety, like staying in certain jobs for longer than I
Mm.
should have, just because I'm like, I need a job and I need health insurance and I need, security. So being unhappy in a job for longer just because I like was craving that security and that, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's something, I mean, I see that in the people we work with all the
Mm-hmm.
time. And I think that's a very real thing that a lot of people deal with. And then something that I'm learning about the Enneagram too is that we're all dealing with similar things, it seems like, but then the weight that we carry with those different things is kind of what changes when our personality leans different ways. So it's like a lot of people might struggle with that kind of feeling, that security feeling, but for sixes, it weighs very, very heavily
Mm-hmm.
on them. And so what is it when you've decided to leave jobs in the past, what is it that has driven you to make that decision of like, okay, it is time to go, it is time to make that transition, even if it might not be 100% secure or safe? Or alternatively, did you always pursue that 100% security before making a change?
I didn't. So the one time I didn't do it, I moved back to, so I grew up in South Carolina. So I moved back to South Carolina from New York City after about 7 years in New York. And my job in New York actually allowed me to work remotely for a little bit, but I really didn't want to do that job anymore. So I ended up quitting that job without a job.
Hmm.
And let's say that was January 1st. It actually was January 1st of 2013. And then I didn't have a job for like 6 weeks. I ended up taking a job that, again, I probably shouldn't have taken, but I was so like, there weren't a lot people I was meeting with were just saying there weren't a lot of job opportunities, and I felt like pressured, and I ended up taking a huge pay cut, and it was just not a great situation. So looking back, of course, I'm like, I should have done this and should have done that. I should have stayed a little bit longer in New York, or I should have searched a little bit longer. And it's this like self-imposed thing because I was living at home at the time. So like I didn't have rent to pay, like I could have stretched it out a little bit more, but I think I don't know how to get over, I mean, that safety and security thing. So I feel like I did still make that decision of taking this job and, whatever. I think the way though to get out of it is getting support from other people, even though like craving that support. So like asking close friends or my parents or my older brother, about what I'm struggling with, and them not being like, I don't even know what my brother's Enneagram is, but he's not a 6. And so he's more that's like, this is not making you happy. This is making you miserable. Like you need to get out of that situation and you'll be able to figure it out. And I've always been kind of, frugal, responsible with money. So like I do have some savings, I do have things to feel secure still. So I think just talking to other people and getting my like inner dialogue out by like voicing it and saying my fears and having them repeat back, like saying like you can work through that, or there's options, or there's an alternative, that you can consider, in asking people that I respect, for their opinion and how they would handle it. And just, I think that's been helpful.
Yeah, it sounds like it would be very helpful for a 6 to seek external processing, or places to process externally rather than keeping everything in your head. I was reading up on 6s a little bit, and I was reading something that was talking about the inner committee of a 6 and how like and this speaks back to what you were talking about with working like with supply chain, of you can kind of picture everything that could possibly go wrong and what you need to do and all these contingency plans. And maybe that inner committee is what allows you to do that, to be able to kind of see everything that could go wrong, which also then translates into the anxiety of it all. But where was I going to bring that back to? Maybe just can you talk to a little bit about the inner committee and kind of what, having community around you to then be able to process things externally. That's what we were talking about. Do you feel that inner committee? Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I do. I think there is an inner committee. I think it's also important as a 6 to limit who your outside committee is. In the sense that, you have like 1 or 2 trusted people that you run your ideas by, and then end it there. Like, because I also have fellow friends that are 6s that will ask like 6 or 7 people where they're going to have 6 or 7 different opinions. And so that just gets you either putting off your decision longer or coming up with more ideas. And I think sometimes it's just better to just have your thoughts and then ask 1 or 2 people that you trust, just for some feedback, and then kind of cut it off there. Because I think if you start going to too many people, which is something 6s can do, it just can drag things on longer and longer. Like even this is not work related, but I even see myself doing it right now. Like I'm in the market to buy a new car, and that process is just terrible for me. On so many levels. And like my brother is really into cars, so sometimes I ask him his opinion, but I don't really know what I want to do. I'm like, what, again, going back, like, what's the safe, secure decision for me to make, both financially and both, what's a good investment? Not like car is an investment, but just what's a good decision that way. And so I just see myself like running into those decision fatigue type things, or asking too many people's opinion. I finally actually got, there's somebody that will help you. He started a business that will help you like decide what car to get. He'll ask you like a survey and say like, what are your top needs in your car? It's like 20 questions you answer, and then he finds what cars are in your price range and whatever. And then he sets up like the test drives and whatever, and will help you go through the payment process and all that stuff. So
that's
awesome. Like, it's awesome. So for somebody like me that's like, doesn't really know what they want and has to ask too many people's opinions. So now I have this one guy that's going to like listen to me and feedback and totally unbiased. And so finding solutions like that. So I think even in career, kind of what you guys are doing, I think it's a similar like what he's doing is kind of like what you guys are doing.
Mm-hmm.
Helping people eliminate that inner dialogue or, all that decision, coming up with like asking a few pointed questions, but then also helping limit all the different advice you're trying to get from other people and different opinions and things like that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that's amazing advice to keep in mind for sixes, to what you said about limiting how many people you're going to for opinions. Also, can you shout
Mm-hmm.
out that guy who has that business?
Yeah, it's called the Driveway Concierge.
Driveway Concierge.
Concierge,
That's
yeah, and he's
amazing.
located in Charlotte,
Oh,
but I think he can help people nationwide or whatever. He has an Instagram and stuff like that. So,
that's
yeah.
so good. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I love when people have creative businesses like that. But that actually feeds right into another question that I wanted to ask you about, because I was really interested in when I interviewed my friend Jaren last week for the type 5 Enneagram. And we had a conversation about how type 5s would not be a person, or someone with a type 5 personality wouldn't really seek out coaching and wouldn't really
Mm-hmm.
seek out mentorship. How do you see that with the type 6? Kind of going off what you were just saying, more likely it sounds like than a 5 to seek out something like
Yeah, I
coaching.
think so. I do
Mm-hmm.
think so because the tendency to seek other people's opinions and kind of and then again, I think wanting that security and support and things like that. So you kind of ask other people's opinions. And then again, I'm a wing 5, so
Mm-hmm.
still wanting all that information. So I think gathering all the information and wanting to know what all the options are and if I'm making the best decision. But then again, you kind of, there's let's say there's thousands of cars out there, there's thousands of jobs out there, you need to
Mm-hmm.
kind of hone in on like maybe three different companies or three different careers or three different whatever, and then go from there.
Yeah. Yeah. So with your career, we were talking before this call about the transitions you've made more recently in your career, and you've had a couple different transitions. So how has, when you're looking back on your career from early on years where that drive for security was really driving a lot of your decisions, how has that advanced over your career? How have you worked through that fear of being without support or guidance?
So I think as I've been working longer and longer and working with different types of peers and just different personalities and all of that, kind of becoming secure in my decision making,
Mm-hmm.
especially now in the job I have. My manager is remote, where my company is like macro wise is a huge company, but our little practice is smaller in what we do. And again, like I said, my manager is remote in DC, and there's a lot of decisions to be made about things. And so in the beginning, I would ask her, to kind of feel out what her style was or whatever. But then she's so busy, I can send her an email and not hear from her for a day or something, and which
Mm-hmm.
I need to get things done. So kind of empowering myself to just make the decision. And I think sometimes, maybe consciously or subconsciously, she is not responding to emails to kind of force me to make the decision, of like what a certain email I send out should say, or like a marketing email, or decisions on different promotional items or things I do with marketing, just to have me make the decision. And then after I've made the decision, I also thrive. I think this is a sixth thing off of like doing the right thing,
Mm-hmm.
so, or I guess not really doing the right thing, but getting good feedback on, like, I
Mm-hmm.
need to be reinforced feedback. Like, yes, that was a good decision. Like maybe not even that I care about. It's not that I care about whatever I created was so good, but that whoever I created it for, they thought it was good. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, that's what I need. So I think after a little bit of time of getting that feedback of, you're doing a good job, then I'm like, okay, then I can tell myself I'm doing a good job if somebody else tells me I'm doing a good job.
Mm-hmm.
So then being able to confidently make decisions without needing feedback on every little thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I see myself doing that with younger colleagues, I guess you could say, or people earlier in their career, when they're asking me questions and about, is this okay? Is this email okay? Or is this wording okay? Or what should I do? And I'm like, well, what do you think you should do? Like,
Yeah.
you try it first and then try something and then I can help you, but I don't want to just hand it to you. So I think just becoming more secure and more confident in my decision making and my knowledge of, marketing and things like that has helped over
Mhm.
the years.
Yeah, it sounds like practice.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what it is. And I mean, in order to practice something, right, you have to first bring that intentionality to it. So, recognizing earlier on in your career if you are a six or if you have any of these tendencies, recognizing those tendencies and being intentional about practicing a different way to handle those or practicing kind of against those tendencies if it's not something that is really helping you in your career. If you're finding yourself needing to go to too many people asking if this is the right email to send or whatever it may be, recognizing that early on and very intentionally just saying, like, okay, I'm going to ask one person, get their feedback, and then I have to make the decision by 2 p.m. or whatever
Mm-hmm.
it is, putting those more of structure in place because this is something that can start to spiral out of control more easily for a six than maybe another personality type.
Right.
Yeah. Very cool. I think I always love them when there's very practical advice to work through some of these things, especially because this is definitely, like I was saying earlier, something that I think a lot of people deal with, but especially a type six might deal with it more. Sorry, there's a huge gust of wind that just hit my window. Like, oh my gosh. Um, More heavily. So I want to switch it a little bit though, because sometimes with these personality tests and types and whatever, we can talk a lot about the seemingly negative, but tell me about the superpowers of being a six. Like what are you able to bring to your team or to your company that is really unique to your personality?
Mm-hmm. I think I am very organized and very list based and very conscientious about my work and about grammar and about, you know, how things are packaged up correctly. Like we ship a lot of things to different conferences and stuff, and making sure that that's done well. And we have different client events, so making sure that you are, presenting well in front of a client. I think a lot of those things, like the small attention to detail things,
Mm-hmm.
are very important in, and that comes out in,
Yeah.
some of that. So,
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what I was thinking too of I I've noticed just in my own life of when I'm helping a friend plan something or whatever it might be, I'm like, oh, well, what about this, this, and this? And they're thinking, or they say, I didn't even think about that and how
mm-hmm,
important that is for. I know that's something that you probably run into as well when you're shipping out
mm-hmm,
these things to events or whatever it may be. It's like, okay, well, if this happens or if there's a storm, we need
right.
to have this contingency plan and we're going to reroute the things and whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then people are just kind of amazed at, wow, I can't believe you thought through all of that. And then do you find yourself having a moment where you're like, well, what do you mean? Of course we have
Of
to
course,
think
you have
through
to
this
do,
stuff.
yes, all the time, yes. And that's even like in personal life and in work life, where if I'm planning for something or I'm, planning an event or party, birthday party, or just planning a family trip or something, and like coming up with like a plan, like, okay, these are what we're gonna do on these days, and if this happens, and the weather looks like this, and maybe we should do this on this day, or
Mm-hmm.
just again, it kind of goes back to like a kind of a negative, but the worst case scenario situation, like thinking, but also it's helpful,
Mm-hmm.
so it can be helpful.
Yeah. How do you keep yourself from being able to do like doing worst case scenario thinking, but keeping that from really stealing your joy in a situation?
I think recognizing that you can only control what you can control, for
Mm-hmm.
one, you can only control so much. And then also catching yourself thinking like, what if you, it's like that saying that's like, well, what if you fall? It's like, well, what if you fly? Like
Yeah.
it's kind of like change. It's kind of being conscious of changing your thought process. So I think in the moment thinking like, okay, is this a legitimate fear, or is this fear that's in my head of like something going wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to just think more positively.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, I want to hear about just your relationship with Christ and how that has helped you through this as well. Is there anything that comes to mind, like immediately with that? How has trusting God, like, helped you in fighting through that fear and fighting through that insecurity of not having support?
Yeah, I think I do carry a lot of worry. Like, I'm worried about this, or I'm worried about that. And that's like, it's like a sin, to worry so much. Like, you shouldn't worry about what you're going to wear, what you're going to eat, or what, the birds don't worry about, that verse. So I think, is stopping in that moment literally and just asking God to like take that worry away, and trusting that it will work out, or if it doesn't work out, it's still going to be okay. Like, luckily in my job, I'm not working at a hospital. I'm not working at, an airport, where there aren't lives in danger. So, I think also just bringing it back to that, to be like, okay, reality check that even if it doesn't work out, it still will be okay, and just trusting, asking God to give you peace about that, has helped over the years.
Yeah. It's reminding me of, 2 Timothy something. 2 Timothy. No, I'm not even going to try. For God did not give me a spirit of fear, but of power, self-discipline, sound mind, something like that. Look it up for yourself. Great verse. And it sounds like, kind of removing the gravity of everything is up to me, everything is within my control, like you were saying, removing that by just reminding yourself, who is in control, and God is actually in control of everything. And our responsibility is to just steward what he has in front of us, and to do that excellently, which I think is a superpower of a 6, to do things excellently. And it just sounds like the cross to bear in the situation is the more weight that you do feel to make sure everything goes well, and that that it's funny because the fear of security, I'm going to go back to what I was saying earlier of like, we all definitely deal with that, I would assume, in some capacity, just as humans. But me not being a 6, I can't even imagine like how much more weight it might carry. And I think that's going to help a lot of people who are listening to this podcast and might be experiencing that more in a more weighty way than maybe some of their friends or some of their community. But that does bring me to a question that I am just curious if you have anything to add to this about our search for finding a 6 to come on this podcast. Was honestly a little bit challenging finding one. And you and I were laughing about that because a lot of your friends are 6s. So I really just needed to discover your friend group. But do you have any thoughts about that? Like, what do 6s band together maybe? Or maybe would a 6 not be so inclined to take the Enneagram test? Any kind of thoughts about why it was hard?
Yeah, I think there are some, I know every Enneagram quote has like a negative and positive, but I think maybe some of the parts of the 6 people don't want to identify with, they don't want to admit that they are suspicious, and they are like so full of worry or things like that. So I think maybe some of that, and also I think, this is going to sound whatever, but 6 can be kind of like boring, I guess. Maybe it's like seen as kind of like boring, in a way. Because I know like 4s are like aren't 4s like the creative ones? Yeah. And like 7s, like the adventurous ones. And, so I think maybe 6 is just kind of like, it's just kind of plain or something. But, so that could be it. And then also on the flip side, why I have friends that are 6s is because we like relate. We're like, are you worried about? Yes, I was worried about that. So we like have the same fears, and we have the same anxieties and things like that. So we kind of like can understand each other in that way. So we like seek security and seek those things. But also I think one of the things of a 6 is like humor, or there's something with humor or something like that. And but I also, and there's other parts of 6s that are like, take time. I think we take time to get to know people, to trust people. You take time to trust people. So that goes both ways, where I take a while to open up to people, to see if I trust them, to see if they can see the like true me, And so I think that could be a barrier of sixes, just like not trusting people. So maybe not talking about their inner feelings, and it just doesn't even get to the conversation of what they are as an Enneagram,
Yeah. Oh, that is so eye-opening to me. I think a lot of what you were saying was ringing true to me just in my search and in learning more about a six. And it sounds like, it's might be a little bit more challenging to get to know a six, but once you're in because they're the
Right.
loyalist. Yeah.
Right. And I think, again, going back to the humor piece, is like, once you're in, then their humor, like they can, put their guard down and their humor comes out and their sarcasm and things like that. Because I feel like you have to feel comfortable with someone to be sarcastic. Like, I think sarcasm is one of the traits. And so I think there has to be a level of trust with somebody before you can show your sarcastic side and things like that. So yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of mine.
Oh, that's great insight. And it reminds me too of a question just about being the loyalist and being at a company, and then it's time to leave that company. It's time to go to another one, whatever that looks like in your career. Has that affected you in the past, leaving places?
Yes. So exactly. Again, not knowing this, because I didn't know, but back in New York with my job, I didn't want to like offend anyone at my job in New York that I wanted to leave, but I really didn't want to do that job anymore. And I had been applying for jobs a little bit here and there, but nothing was coming up in New York. And so I was like, maybe I just need to move back to South Carolina and kind of take a break and think about what I need to do next. And so I told my company, I was like, I really want to move back to South Carolina. I just miss home. And they're like, oh, okay, well, we'll let you work remotely. And I was like, oh, thanks. But I like really didn't want to do the job anymore. But then I couldn't say no. You know what I mean? So I was like, okay, yeah, I'll work remotely. And I'm like back still doing this job that I don't really like back in South Carolina. So once I had some separation of time, I think it was probably like a month or so, then at the beginning of the year, I was like, yeah, I don't think it's going to work for me to do remotely anymore. So I kind of like eased out of the job, because I couldn't say I have another job. I didn't have another job. And I felt like it was a bad excuse to be like, I don't want to work here anymore. Like I felt like I couldn't even say that to them, in person. I had to like move away completely and then be gone and then be like, yeah, I don't think I'm gonna do this anymore. Okay. So that's definitely come up where I see myself. Like I told my company, I remember because I was also had a roommate situation, and I told my company that I didn't want to, I wanted to move back to South Carolina to be closer to family. And I told my roommate that I wanted to leave my job. And so I like pulled them different stories because I didn't want to offend anybody. And so, yeah, that's come up.
Yeah. It sounds like, again, another cross to bear as a six. Well, maybe I won't even name it as a cross to bear, but something that sixes struggle with is prolonging pain. It just in indecision. And then even when you are decided, figuring out how to communicate that decision to others out of fear of maybe like losing their support and guidance, right? That you just kind of sit in this prolonged pain, which links back to anxiety. And something you were mentioning earlier about the description of the six is maybe not always like what people want to hear. And I feel like I heard somewhere, I didn't fact check this, so who knows? But I heard that six is actually the most common type. Someone told me that while I was on my search to get a six. I was like, thank you so much for telling me that.
But again, it might have been a thing where, people aren't comfortable as a six to talk about, I don't know, to talk about their six sixness or something. I don't know. But, or you just might, the sixes kind of surround each other with each other. I don't know. Yeah. But I've also heard it's a common one too. So.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I mean, when you read a six, because something that my friends and I have talked about with the six is just, they're the ones who struggle most with anxiety. And then we're all like, oh, well, like raise your hand, because so many people are struggling with anxiety today. So maybe it's even that someone who's a six might take the Enneagram, read the description, be like, okay, well, doesn't everyone struggle with this? And then they move on. They don't really care to learn more about it. And that's something Kelsey and I talk about all the time, especially on this podcast, is it's actually a moment to pay attention to if you find yourself saying or thinking, well, doesn't everyone think like this? Doesn't everyone do things like this? And when you
Mm-hmm.
find yourself saying that, that's where, it's a good place to stop and be like, actually, no,
Mm-hmm.
it's not. It's not like this for everyone. And this is something that is special and unique about me. And there is good here to uncover. There's helpful things here to uncover. So to continue diving into it. Also, this isn't a pitch for you have to go and read about the Enneagram. Like, do what works for you. But I just always want to people to pause when they have that instinct of, oh, well, this is how it is for everyone, because that's not the case. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
times those are the very unique things about us, and they present differently in people across the board. So it's interesting. It's just I was laughing when we were talking on the phone and you were like, well, I know a ton of sixes. I'm like, oh my gosh. I just needed to uncover. So, when you're speaking or when you're thinking about those people who maybe read the six description and they're like, that sounds like me, but I'm bummed that sounds like me. I don't really want to be this personality, or they're struggling through leaving a job in their career, or making a decision in their career to go to a company or not go to a company. What would you tell them? Like, how does it get better?
Um, One thing I think, like you say, kind of with experience, it just gets better. There was
Mm-hmm.
a girl in my community group who's early in her career, and she was having to leave a position to go somewhere else. And she was just like, I just don't want my old company to be mad at me. And
Mm.
some of us who have been working a lot longer were like, it doesn't matter if they're mad at you, like this is about you. You working for a huge company, like they're going to find somebody else, you know, um, you will be okay. Everybody's going to move on. If there was a situation with the company and they had to let people go, they wouldn't be worried about how you
Mm-hmm.
felt, type of thing. So it's just kind of, I think it takes time and experience with just different jobs and different careers, and leaving and knowing that like it'll be okay. And people usually are really happy for you,
Mm-hmm.
that you're finding something else, and that you want to be happy. Even people I talk with in my job now, it's like, if this doesn't make you happy, don't feel like you need to stay here for somebody else, like go do what you're feeling called to do as your career, what your interests are, and align with that,
Mm-hmm.
because we're working a lot
Yeah.
in your life, and you want to make it enjoyable. So,
Yeah. And
yeah.
ultimately, that's how you're going to be glorifying God the
Right.
most, is when you're working within the gifts and talents that He's given you.
Mm-hmm.
And, you don't, in your exit interview, need to go on and on and on about that. But that's something, like you said, that people are genuinely happy for you when you do take that step. Um, and also, it sounds like, someone in a specific scenario of someone deciding to leave a job, another piece of advice there would be like, have your one or two people you talk to, like you mentioned
Mm-hmm.
earlier. Don't go around looking for that external validation from everyone. So really focus on building those mentors and that community in your life, and have a short list
Mm-hmm.
that is giving you
Yes.
that advice. Yeah. Yeah. And also, I was just amazed when I was reading about the six, um the hardworking element and how important that is. And again, I just have a feeling when you talk to a hard worker and you compliment them on their being a hard worker, they're like, yeah. And then they have, I imagine, this internal moment go on where they're like, well, doesn't everyone, this is just how you do it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't you try your best, or wouldn't you try all the
Mhm.
options, or wouldn't you, why would you not try to
Yeah.
do the best you can, type of thing. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And that is a special part of being a six, being reliable, being hardworking, and being trustworthy. Just steady people is another thing that was
Mm-hmm.
coming up in what I was reading about. That is so valuable to, people in your community, but especially to a company, and especially in
Mm-hmm.
today's world where people are leaving jobs very quickly and leaving jobs very, shorter time frames than ever before. To be someone who's loyal, reliable, hardworking, that is such an asset to bring into an interview and to bring into a position. So do not sell yourself short on that. and own it, because not everyone has it. Not everyone's bringing that to the table. And that is a really special part about being a 6. And also know that when we talk about the anxiety that kind of goes with being a 6 as well, that can be turned into a superpower too, of just being able to have these contingency plans and being able to predict where things might go wrong. There is a really beautiful side to that. Of course, anxiety is something that needs to be dealt with. I'm not a mental health professional.
Right.
That's my official disclaimer. But there is a power to being able to have these plans. I was actually thinking earlier that it sounds like event planning would be a really good career option for someone as a 6.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. And there's been event planning parts of jobs that I've been in, so it's fun.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Bryn, thank you so much for this conversation. I just want justice for the 6s out there, because I really love learning about the 6. I've loved our conversation. I love what it seems like 6s bring to the table. And, I know as Kelsey and I think about our team and expanding in the future, I'm looking for a 6 out here. Yeah. They seem like a great person to have on your team.
They're good employees.
Yeah. Yeah, which is great. And we need good employees out there. We need good people who are showing up to work and doing what their managers want. And then also good 6s that turn into managers and directors like you to be able to manage people well. So thank you again for this conversation. And I really appreciate all of the wisdom you've been able to share from your experience as a 6. And I hope this helps someone out there.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. All right.
Fun.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. To get an even more meaningful head start into your calling, head to thecalledcareer.com, where my fellow career coach Audrey and I have created a whole suite of free resources and tools to help you get clear and get a job today. For those who are definitely ready to land a job or start a business in the next 6 to 12 months, we're here to help you biblically and practically discern your calling through coaching, reflection, and deep market research. Identify the job that's aligned with it, even if you currently have no idea what you want. Rebrand your resume and LinkedIn to translate your background to appeal to your future boss. P.S. We take this off your plate and do this for you. Also, we'll teach you how to land referrals and get attention from leadership through networking. Again, if that makes you nervous, we have these emails and LinkedIn messages literally written for you so you don't have to sweat. We're also here to give you unlimited interview practice so you're prepared to address every elephant in the room and knock selling yourself out of the park. Then we'll round out with helping you negotiate your salary so you land thousands more. Just so you know, recent clients have gotten $8,000 to $50,000 salary increases, even though they were totally non-traditional candidates. That's because we specialize in helping non-traditional career pivoters land jobs they're ecstatic to serve in. It takes work, but we're here to see you through until the end, when we're celebrating that day that you send me an email in all caps and you say, Kelsey, I got the job. Then you could be on the podcast. But I'll be here until then, keeping you accountable and encouraged by meeting with you literally until you land the job you want, even if that's up to 6 months from now within our program. Apply to join at thecalledcareer.com, and I'll see you next week here at Answer the Call. Bye for now.